Anthony, keep the noise down, please. Hello, welcome to White Day Veg Gardening and Worm Farm Q&A Live. Today we will be discussing some gardening topics and whatever you want to discuss. And we're also going to be discussing aphids as well. It is important to understand. It is important to understand. It is important to understand. This thing on. Yeah, it is important to understand about aphids because they tend to be one of the most popular pests. Oh, hi, Ann White. Hi, Heebie Jeebie. Okay, sorry about that. I have to get rid of unwanted things in my life. Yes, so sorry about that. Yes, so we will be discussing whatever you want to talk about, and we will also be discussing aphids, as I said before. Oh, hi, Mom. So thank you guys for being here. So if there's anything you wanted to talk about, feel free to go ahead and do so. Let's try to block this person before they decide to get rude on my channel. And today's not a good day for someone to be messing with me. Harassment. Okay, good. Yes, so sorry about that. Yes, so aphids. What do you know about aphids? Apart from that, they are annoying creatures that tend to want to decimate our gardens. So aphids, they are such tiny creatures. Some of them are so small that it is difficult to see them. Some of them you can see, and there are many different species of aphids. Something interesting about aphids is that the variety or the generation that is born right after the winter, these ones, they're all born as females. They're also known to be asexual, so they don't reproduce, they clone themselves, which is why you can have so much trouble with their population. And so all of the generation that is born between spring and summer, these are all females. The male, they do have males, but in order to have males during the fall and the winter, these aphids will mate with the male and lay their eggs, and the eggs will lay dormant over the winter, and then as soon as spring comes, then the eggs will hatch into females. So when it is close to fall, then you will have the male aphids being born. Oh, and White says I didn't know that. Yeah. But there's a lot of interesting facts about them. Did you know that they can live up to 30 days, anything between 25 and 30 days? One aphid can actually lay eggs up to, or clone themselves up to 5 times in a day. And they can do that for up to 30 days. So over the lifespan of the aphids, they can actually reproduce 80 eggs. Now, how long does it really take aphids to reach maturity? It does not take long. It takes 7 days for them to reach maturity, and then the egg laying process or the cloning begins. Let's see, and why it says I had to cut off some of, oh, I had to cut off more of our rose plant because it have over 100. Wow, this was just 2 days ago. And I remember you saying you cut it down sometime November, December, I think that was, and you still had to cut again. That's a lot of aphids. And the thing about aphids is that they are difficult to control. There are some species of aphids that are even more difficult than others. And aphids, they can be either wingless or winged. So the ones that are wingless are mostly the females. The males can be wingless as well, but most of the females. And these wingless ones, they don't necessarily need wings to fly. They tend to develop wings when their food source or the plant that they're on run out and they need to migrate to another plant. Then the species or the generation that is born after will be born with wings. But most of the first set of generations after the spring starts are actually wingless. Yeah. So, like I said, the aphids, they tend to, the females, they clone themselves. Now, aphids are known to spread viruses to plants, and they are able to do that because when they inject their stylus into the plant to feed, if the plant is infected, then the virus will be on their stylus, and when they move to another plant, as soon as they inject their stylus into that plant, then the disease is transferred. Now, there are some viruses that are transferred instantly once they attack another plant, and then there are some plants that it is not really instant, but they do quite a lot of damage. So, when you are treating aphids, it is important to make sure that you do it regularly. So you can't just treat your plants for aphid today and then you leave it at that. It will not get rid of them because most of the treatments that we use for aphids will affect the creatures but not necessarily the eggs. And so what will happen is that even if you kill the creatures, the eggs remain and those will hatch and be a problem. So you want to one prevent the aphids from reaching to the mature state because that is when they start laying the eggs. And like I said before, that takes 7 days for them to reach maturity. So it is recommended that when you are treating plants for aphids, then you need to ensure that you do this every 6 to 7 days. You can do it every 5 to 7 days because you want to prevent them from being able to lay eggs. It is also important when you're trying to control the aphids to remove weed or weeds from your garden because this provide an habitat for the eggs and the eggs can stay there and overwinter. So you want to remove weed from your garden. Avoid using fertilizer that is rich in nitrogen because for some reason they tend to gravitate to that. I don't know if it is the fertilizer that they like or maybe it is the benefit of the fertilizer on your plants. Because as you know, the more fertilizer, the more nitrogen your plant have, the more foliage you're going to have. So if you use a lot of fertilizer in your garden, a lot of nitrogen fertilizer in your garden, then it increases the chances of you having a lot of aphids. Now, you can also use certain type of netting to keep aphids off your plants. There are some of these nettings comes with insecticide infused in them, so you can actually purchase those. I don't know how you would go about infusing your own net with insecticide, whether homemade or commercial insecticide. I guess that is something you can look into. But yes, you can actually buy commercial nets that has insecticide infused in it. Also, a good idea is to remove plant debris from your garden, because when you have plant debris, this too is going to provide them with an habitat for them to actually live in, and you don't want that. And aphids and their eggs can survive extreme temperatures. So sometimes we might be happy that yes, it is winter, but depending on the species of aphids, they may be able to survive extreme temperatures. Let's see. Okay, that's the same comment I read before. All right. Yes. So when another method that you can use to control aphid is to do companion planting with plants that are likely to repel aphids, and you want to grow the variety of plants that are resistant to aphids. So when you're getting seeds or your seedlings, that is something that you have to pay attention to, whether it is a variety that is resistant to pests. So, you guys, have you ever had aphids, and how do you go about treating the aphids that you have in your garden? What methods do you use? In my garden last year, I had really bad, that's the worst case of aphids. In fact, I don't recall having aphids prior to last year. If I did, it was so minute that I didn't really notice. But I had a lot of them to deal with last year, so I bought something from the stores that is supposed to be organic. I don't know if it is, but it is supposed to be. But I ended up with a lot of damage. But looking back at the container, I think maybe I was in error, because they suggest holding the bottle at a certain distance. I did not hold it that distance. I hold it a little bit too close, so my plants got burnt. Could you repeat the question, please? Oh, I was asking, for those of you who have had problems with aphids, how do you treat the aphids in your garden? Right, so after using that powder to get rid of, well, it wasn't a powder, it was a foam. After using that spray to get rid of the aphids and almost losing my plants, I had to get rid of some of the plants. It did work well for the aphids, to be honest, but I don't think I'll be using it again. So after that, I started using diatomaceous earth. So diatomaceous earth is very good for killing most flying insects, especially the small ones, because their body is covered with a waxy exoskeleton, and the particles from the diatomaceous earth actually cuts into their waxy layer, and this will cause them to become dehydrated and eventually die. So diatomaceous earth is a very good pest repellent. The only negative thing about it is that it does not only affect the pests, it affects good insects or beneficial insects as well. So if you're using diatomaceous earth, then just use it as much as is necessary and no more, because you don't want to be affecting your beneficial insects. Another method that you can use is the garlic soaked in water for at least 24 hours. Let's see. And White says, I was using your garlic solution, but this year I will be making a different solution along with garlic. Okay. And White says, the garlic solution works well. Yes, it did work well for me too. And then I started having problems with other pests. Yeah, but last year was a pretty bad one where pest is concerned, and I think it was because I decided to grow um, a lot of the brassica family. So those really invite pests to your garden. But what can you do? If you want those things, you have to grow them. Yeah, so I think that is why I end up with problems with pests last year. And then you can also use a solution with baking soda and water mixed with a little bit of neem oil. If you don't have neem oil, you can use other oils, but neem oil is very good for aphids and other pests because something about the neem oil actually damage their reproductive potential, and because of that it is very good to make a pesticide. So you use a tablespoon of neem oil with a liter of water and 2 to 3 tablespoons of baking soda and a few drops of dishwashing soap, and mix it well, and that works pretty well as an organic pesticide. Let's see. Born Free says neem oil and water. Yes, you're correct. Neem oil is very good as a pest repellent. One thing though about using oils on your plants as a pest repellent, although they work pretty well, you have to be careful because if you're using oil when the time is very hot, then it can damage your plants. So be careful of the amount that you use on your plants during hot seasons. Yes, and the reason you would want to use a few drops of dishwashing soap, and you want to make sure that it is eco-friendly dishwashing soap, is because the soap help to make the pesticide stick onto the plant. So that is the purpose of the soap in it. But you also need to be careful how much of it you put in your solution, and you also have to be careful how often, or I shouldn't say often, but how close to when you're going to be harvesting your vegetables that you actually use these pesticides. So if you're using organic pesticides, homemade pesticides, 2 weeks prior to harvesting is a good time to actually apply pesticides, but nothing closer than 2 weeks. You can apply it depending on where you get your pesticides from and what instructions are on it. Pay close attention to that so that you can know when to use it prior to harvesting. Let's see, and why it says I do not use soap. Oh, okay. Of course, if you're going to be making pesticides to control aphids and other pests, you also need to be careful of the strength of the pesticide. And it is advisable that you test it on your plants, like a few leaves of your plants, before you actually use it all over your garden. And keep in mind also that some plants are more sensitive than others. So you don't just want to test it on one plant, you want to test a little bit on each of your plants to ensure that you do not damage your plants, because if the pesticide is too strong, then you can damage your plants either temporarily or permanently. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. I've never used neem oil on my plants yet. So I'm yet to purchase some because I'm expecting those aphids to come back. And one thing about pests is that they have very good memory. So if they know that in the north side of your garden they were able to find some brassicas like cabbage and such, then next year they're going to be going back to that location because they know that that is where they found it last year. And it doesn't matter where in your garden, they are going to be able to find it. So that is one reason why it is so important to do uh, plant rotation, because you disturb the memory of where they find stuff and it confuses them. And for things like cabbage moth and stuff like that, have you ever noticed that when you see them in your garden, they tend to hover around for a little bit before they land on something? They're actually searching, and they get confused if they have to stay there for long to search for what they want. So it is a good idea when you're planting things that are affected by pests that you put plants together with different heights. So don't just plant everything that is going to be on a consistent height, because by doing so, it will actually hide some of the plants and make it more difficult for them to find. And if you do companion planting, whether you're going to be using herbs with whatever else you're growing or you're going to be using flowers, the various smell or scent of the different plants that you have help to confuse these pests, and that will help to protect your plants. So that is also one of the benefits of doing companion planting. Okay, so this is all of the information that I have on aphids. So I hope with this information you'll be able to protect your plants a little bit more from aphids. Now, what about leaf miners? Have you guys ever experienced leaf miners in your garden? I've never really had any experience with them, but Melanie asked me to talk about leaf miners, so I did some research on it, so I'm going to be sharing with you what I found. And if you have had any experience with leaf miners that you would like to share, hi Melanie, as soon as I call your name, there you go. Sian says, great information. Thank you for sharing. It will be helpful. Okay, you're welcome, Sian. Right, so as Melanie wanted me to talk about leaf miners, you're welcome, Melanie. So I was pretty surprised when I did my research on them. The amount of information that was there, it was just actually overwhelming. It was so overwhelming, it is pretty hard to remember everything that was said about them, but then I choose to jot down the more important information about them so that in case I run into them or in case anyone who is on my live need that information, then hopefully it will be helpful. And White says, I've never heard of them, I don't think. Okay. Yeah, prior to Melanie asking about them a month or so ago, I've never heard of them either. I've heard of leaf hoppers and stuff like that, but I've never really heard of leaf miners. So it is said that there are actually numerous species of them, and their larvae live inside the tissue of the plants, the leaf of the plant tissue. So it makes it a bit of a challenge for us to do anything about them being in our garden. Now, it is interesting to learn that these species include things like sawflies, moths, flies, and a few beetles. So leaf miners covers a few varieties of insects. Now, unfortunately, they are protected from some predators, and this is because, as I mentioned before, they actually live inside the tissue of the plant leaves. And so it is difficult for predators to reach them, and they're also protected from some pesticides as well because they're in the leaves. Now, the type of insects and its species can be identified by such things as the patterns of their feeding as they tunnel through the leaves. They can be, the species can be identified by the pattern of their droppings that they leave behind, by the shape of the tunnels that they leave behind in the leaf, the layer of the leaf through which they tunnel, and it can also be used to identify. They can also be identified based on the type of plants that they infect or affect, because not all leaf miners affect all type of plants. So each type will have their specific group of plants that they prefer, so that can be used to identify what species they are. Now, there are some crops that is called trap crops that you can use to protect your plants from leaf miners. So things like lamp water or columbine can be used to help control or prevent leaf miners from destroying your crops. So if you're going to be growing these, then you want to grow them outside the perimeter of your garden, so that they will attack those first, and then those plants will keep them occupied so that they won't affect the actual crops that you want to be growing. So I'm going to be discussing for a bit lamb's quarter and the columbine or columbine plants. So the lamb quarter, it is actually an edible weed, and it can be used similar to how you use spinach. It can be eaten fresh or in salads. You can use it as greens. You can use it in juices. So if you are growing lamb's quarter, it's not as if you're growing it and it is just there occupying space. You can actually eat it as well. So it would serve a dual purpose if you're growing it, because then it would keep the leaf miners from the rest of your crop. Now, the seeds of lamb's quarter can be used in things like cereals, or you can ground it up to use it to make bread, and they are a very nutritious staple. So here, this makes it even more beneficial to grow it. Now, the leaves of lamb's quarter can be used to make a paste that will treat things like arthritis, insect bites, inflammation, sunburns, and minor scrapes. Um, what does it look like? What do I tell you? I'm not sure how to describe it actually, because it's not a plant that I am very familiar with. So I look it up on the internet to see an image of it, but I don't really know how to describe what it looks like to you. Sorry about that. Yes, and even the root of the lamb's quarter, you can actually Google it on the image and see what it looks like. Yes. So as I was saying, the root of the lamb's quarter can be used as a laxative, or it can be used as a cleansing soap as well. So the lamb's quarter actually has a lot of benefits. So if you're having issues with leaf miners, growing lamb's quarter would be a very good idea because of the amount of benefits that you can get from it. Now, lamb's quarter is very rich in nutrients such as iron, calcium, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin B complex, and also has trace minerals in it. So after doing my research on how to prevent leaf miners and seeing what lamb's quarter is, it made me want to grow it. But then, no, I've never really had a problem with leaf miners, but I would really like to grow lamb's quarter. Yeah. Now, one thing to know about lamb's quarter is that it can be invasive, And so if you are growing it for whatever reason, growing it in container might be a pretty good idea. What about the Colombian plant? Let me see. Melanie says, if you see lines on the leaves of beets, switch shards, and radishes, that's a leaf miner. Oh, okay, yes. They usually leave tunnels through your leaves that looks like mop as if they're mopping out something. I don't know what it is that they're mopping out, but they usually leave some whitish lines through the leaves of your plants. So thanks for sharing that, Melanie. So what method do you use, Melanie, to control them when you have a problem with them? Right. So the Colombian is said to be somewhat invasive, but it depends on how much you care for them. So Colombians will actually spread if you care for them too much, but they're not really invasive per se. So when they're growing in the wild where they just maintain themselves, they're not really an invasive plant. A lot of people grow Colombian for flowers, and it has a yellow and white, blue and white, or blue and sorry, yellow and white, blue and white, purple and white, or pink and white color. Sometimes the colors can be plain as well. So yeah, they're actually beautiful flowers. I know not a lot of people like flowers, but they're very effective against leaf miners. I didn't really do much research on the columbine, so I don't really know much about it in terms of what other benefits it has apart from the beautiful flowers and the fact that it repels, well, doesn't repel, it attracts or trap the leaf miners. I just break the leaf off or squash them. Okay. Yes, I guess that would work pretty well, eh? And especially if you catch them pretty early, then they won't get the chance to lay their eggs or anything like that. Yeah. Yeah, so they can be pretty tricky to control because they live in the leaves. And so when you find that you have them, you have to use whatever method. Oh, hi, Pit Stop. Just popping by to say hello, running errands. We'll catch the replay. Okay, my dear, thank you for popping by, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Yeah, so when you find that you have problems with whatever type of pest, whether it is aphids, leaf miners, whatever the pest is, it's a good idea to not take it for granted and to treat it pretty quickly because, as is the case with the aphids and a lot of the pests that affect our plants, they can reproduce within 7 days, and we don't really want them to damage our crops. So once we see them, we have to take action quickly. Let's see. Melanie says also check the back of the leaves for eggs. Now, what do their eggs look like? If you had leaf miners last year, would they come back? That is something that I don't know, but maybe Melanie can answer because she's had experience with them before. Yeah. So I don't know, but most pests usually know, like I said, they know where they find their food, so they will go back to that location. And then the thing is that insects usually lay their eggs and leave their eggs in a location that they consider to be safe so that they can overwinter. And then as soon as the time warms up, then these eggs start hatching and then the problem starts. And some of these eggs are so tiny that you might not even see that they are there. And unfortunately, a lot of the remedies that we have for the home remedies that we have for treating pests does not necessarily kill eggs. Most, not all, some might be able to kill eggs, I don't know which. But because of that, even if we're treating our plants, we still have to deal with the eggs. I don't know how you would kill the leaf miner's eggs. Maybe like Melanie say, squish them. If you see the eggs, then you squish them. Yeah, but I don't really know how to kill their eggs. That is something I'm gonna have to do a lot more research on them, because when it comes to pests, I like to know all I can about them so that in case I should get infected, my plants should get infected with them, then I'll be able to effectively deal with it before it gets out of hand. So Melanie says the eggs are small and white in groups. Okay. So do you know if they lay a lot of eggs all at once, Melanie? Because I know some creatures they might lay one egg, or some might lay several. Can lay hundreds in a day. So like we said about the aphids, they can lay up to five. They can produce up to five offspring in a day. I guess that is why it is such a big bother when you have them, because it is hard to control them if you're going to have one provide producing five offspring in a day. So Melanie, what type of plants do they usually affect, um, based on your experience? Would be interesting to know. I've never really seen any lines on my plants, so I don't think I've ever had an issue with them. I've seen spots from spider mites. I've seen spots from aphids. I think, and I've had spots from Japanese beetles. But so far, I think those are the three pests that I've had to deal with. Last year was my first year gardening, so I'm hoping they don't come back. Okay, it might be a good idea to rotate whatever crops you can this year to ensure that you reduce whatever damage they can do to your crop. And that is another thing, because sometimes when we buy our seedlings from garden centers, sometimes they might have these eggs on them, and all it needs is just one egg, and that can start some serious issue, and especially if that egg produce more than one of these pests. So let's see. And White says, what can I use to sterilize my soil? Okay, hydrogen peroxide. You want anything between 3 and 6% hydrogen peroxide. You can actually use that in water. I don't remember the ratio, but that in in water, in a large quantity of water, will sterilize your soil. And some say that it will actually kill the beneficial insects that are in your soil. But based on my experience using hydrogen peroxide to clean my soil or to sterilize my soil, I did that a few months ago, and I have been doing it consecutively with different potting soil that I have. So the potting mix that I made that was I think October, September, October, I made my potting mix to start my seedlings indoors and to transplant the things that I had in the garden that I wanted to bring indoors. And after I harvested the stuff from there, I sterilized the soil with hydrogen peroxide and water. And when I was making that mix, I used a lot of castings, and my castings had a lot of eggs, worm eggs in it. And when I looked at that soil after I sterilized it, there were actually worms, red wigglers in it. And I know that those red wigglers were not eggs at the time when I sterilized the soil based on the size of the worms, because some of them were actually mature worms. So I don't think hydrogen peroxide actually causes harm to the beneficial life form that is in your soil. In fact, hydrogen peroxide, the only difference between hydrogen peroxide and water is that it has two molecules of oxygen. So where the formula for water is H2O, the formula for hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. So that is the only difference. So pretty much when you add hydrogen peroxide to your garden or to your soil, you're actually adding more oxygen to your soil, which is a good thing. So, yes, based on my experience, it doesn't necessarily damage plant life, or sorry, insect life in your soil. Let's see. Melanie says beets, radish, switch chards, and bok choys. Okay, so those are the plants that the leaf miners affected for you. Okay. Okay, you're welcome, Anwite. Melanie says, I checked every day and there are always new ones. Wow, they must breed quite easily or quite quickly. Oh, hi, Russell. Would hydrogen peroxide kill aphids if used as a soil drench in a potted plant? I doubt it. I doubt it because, I can't say no because I've never really tried that, but my worms survived the hydrogen peroxide. So I don't know if maybe if you use a strong percentage of hydrogen peroxide undiluted, if that would kill aphids. It might be a good idea to do a little test on that and see how it works. But I don't know. I can't say yes and I can't say no because I've never had any experience with that. Okay, so Melanie says, I am using a reading lamp as a grow light. What bulb should I use? That's a good question, and it's not one that I know the answer to. I'm sorry, my dear, I do not know the answer to that one. Um, More than the wattage, I think things like what is that thing called? Wake up, man! Wake up! My brain is sleeping, always sleeping. I don't remember, but it's not the wattage of your light that actually matters. It's the amount of light that the plant is actually getting. Light. One of the things that you have to consider is the light must mimic the sun, the amount of rays that your plant will be getting from the sun. So that is why grow lights are more effective than using regular lights, because regular lights will not mimic the amount of light that your plants will get from the sun. You also need to consider whether or not the plants that you're growing are fruit bearing or not. If it is not fruit bearing, then you can use lights that should be grow lights as well, but they don't necessarily have to be that blue light. And by blue light, it is usually red and blue, or purple and blue, whatever terms they use to describe the color of the lights. Yes, so if your plant is not fruit bearing, then you can use regular grow lights. If it is fruit bearing, it will be necessary to use that blue light because That is going to help your plants to produce both the flowers and the fruits. So if you're growing things like lettuce and stuff that does not flower, then you can use just the regular grow lights. Let's see. LP says, I know I am late, but I made it. Started peppers indoors tonight. Yes, let the fun begin. Yes, I'm so looking forward to it. I think I'm going a bit crazy. I have to be saying, Marsha, don't start it early. If you start it early, you're going to regret it. I have what, 4 days to go before I can actually start my onions inside. And I have the containers with the soil all prepped. I'm going to be, as I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing succession planting with whatever I'm growing. So I'm going to be starting the first set of onions on Friday, and I just can't wait. Let's see. Um, and White says, yes, you have LP. Okay. And White says, I saw a few seeds today. Nice. Yes, I can't start anything, and the only thing I can start in the next 2 weeks are onions. Everything else, I have to wait. I can start sweet potatoes, but I don't have the means to do so because I have to get the sweet potatoes. I went to the store last week to try and see if I can get any more of those Japanese yam, and I saw the label on the in the tray that has the sweet potatoes, and it says Japanese yam. So I'm all excited, and the yams look purple. So I took them up, and then I came home, and after peeling it, I realized, but this is sweet potato. This is not the Japanese yam. It was actually yellow inside. I was a bit disappointed, but hopefully I can get some because if I cannot have them started by March, by the end of March, I won't be able to grow any more sweet potatoes for this year. But at least I have some, so I'm satisfied with that. Well, I can be satisfied with that. I won't say I am because I'm not. Let's see. Oh, that's great. Did you make a video? What did you grow? Are you asking on White or are you asking me, LP? I did make a video of I did make a video, if it's me you're asking, I did make a video of those potatoes because I am doing an experiment with them. I'm doing a competition with the same sweet potato. So I bought two of them and I'm using them to one, each of them is going to be competing against the other. So one is, well, I won't tell you, I won't give you a spoiler. You have to see the video. And I think maybe today is what, Monday? Um, I might switch it around and let you see it either tomorrow or Wednesday. Tomorrow is supposed to be my how to grow. Okay, I'll switch it around and make you see that video tomorrow then with the competition between the sweet potatoes. So this video is only the initial stage of the competition between the two sweet potatoes. And by the two sweet potatoes, I don't mean two varieties, I mean two of the same type of sweet potatoes. So I might switch the videos around so you see that tomorrow. Oh, hi Tracy. Getting clean on the prairies. Thanks for those containers. I am using them quite well. They come in pretty handy. I want to use them to in my garden as some growing containers, but for now, I'm trying to harvest the castings that was frozen so that I can get them for my garden. So I'm using those containers well. Let's see. Okay, so you were asking and white about the video. Okay. Let's see. LP says to Melanie, last year was my first year back to gardening as well. Okay, so all the best to you guys with your garden. It's gonna be a lot of fun this year. Um, I think people are more focused on gardening this year and last year, and more so this year than even last year. So I think it makes gardening a bit more fun when you see far more people getting involved, far more people are sharing their experiences, they're helping each other, they're swapping seeds, and they're doing whatever they can to make sure that we all have a successful garden. So, yes, I think this year gardening is more fun because although each of us are in our own location doing our thing, because we are sharing information with each other, we're learning from each other. So it makes it seem as if we're actually in a group working together. And I actually like that. It makes it more fun. And there is so much to learn. And the funny thing about gardening is there's always new things. And especially when it comes to things like pests, they become more resilient over time to the methods that we use to try to control them. And so, as new ideas come forward, it is really nice that we're able to share it with one another so that we can all have a productive garden. So, yeah, it is fun. Gardening can be frustrating at times, though. It can be frustrating when you're in the planning stage and there is so much that you have to figure out. But although it is frustrating, it is still fun, especially if you're trying not to overdo it all at once, because that is when it gets frustrating. Let's see, LP says, what kind of onions are you growing? I am growing Pattison and white Spanish sweet onions. So those are the only two type of onions. I have a few, maybe a dozen other onions that I'm going to be growing. My sister-in-law gave those to my daughter to grow last year. She didn't want to plant them, so I did. So I'm going to be planting those onions. I don't know what varieties those were. So yeah, but the ones that I'm going to be growing from seeds, they're Pattison and the white sweet onions, Spanish sweet onions. And I'm going to be growing a lot. I think I have one sachet of the Pattison, but I have what? I have two sachet of the sweet onions. I love sweet onions, especially in sandwiches. So my husband loves to eat them in sandwiches. So I'm going to grow as much of them as I can so that he can enjoy it. Plus, onions are good for men. So yeah. Let's see. LP says, I did that tag wrong. Sounds like a fun experiment. Well, I was excited when I started the experiment. I'm even more excited to see what happens from here. I've seen a little bit of progress on my experiment. One I can see progress, the other one I can't see, but I can't elaborate on that. You'd have to go and see the video for yourself. Yeah, so yeah, it will be fun to see the result though, what it's gonna be. Let's see. I'm excited to see it. Okay. Melanie says, oh, my yellow belly is doing great. Getting lots of sleep. The orange one, only two sleeps. Yeah, well, I'm glad that at least the yellow belly that you sound as if you were looking forward to is doing great. I tried to get some of the orange ones from the store, but that didn't work out. I didn't like what I see. They didn't look too as fresh as I would like them to be, so I didn't get them. If I can go back and find fresh one before in the next week or so, then I'll go for it. But I'm not really fussy if I don't get the variety of orange color ones that we have here because those tend to be watery and I don't really like them being watery, but if that's all they have, then I would try to grow it. Let's see. Um, Tracy says, I use earworm casting in my latest batch of winter sowing jugs. Thanks, Marsha. Okay, you're welcome, my dear. Let me know how that turned out. You know what you should do, Tracy? Compare them. Because you say you raise what? European night crawlers? And I raise red wigglers. So the castings that you have comes from the red wigglers that I have. So you should compare the ones that you put in from your European night crawlers and see if there's any difference in growth with your winter sowing. LP says gardening will be even better being a part of a community like this. I agree with you because I've always liked gardening and I've always been doing research on the things that I'm growing. But because I'm doing YouTube, it forces me to do more research than I would normally do. I'm researching things that I wouldn't normally grow. I'm researching, like, for example, I'm researching leaf miners, and I've never really heard of or have any experience with leaf miners. So, since I started doing YouTube, I've been learning so much. So it does make gardening a lot of fun because you know that when you run into trouble, you can go to the members in your group and say, "Okay, have you ever experienced this? How do you treat this problem?" Or you can get information and you can share information. So yes, it is good, it is fun. LP says, I like sweet onions too. I'll be planting bunching and scallions onions first time. Oh, okay, nice. I have a lot of scallions and seeds because we don't get scallions here to buy. So my husband went to the Jamaican store and saw them with a bundle of it because occasionally they will have a supply of it, but not very often. So he bought a lot of it. He came home with a big bag, maybe about 2 pounds. And he says, "Okay, Marcia, I'm giving you half of these and you can go and plant them." So last year I planted all that he gave me, and then they produced seeds. So I have hundreds of seeds at the moment. So I don't know because the plants are still there. Because when I'm harvesting things like chives and green onions and scallions, I don't take them up by the root. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you'd know that when I'm harvesting them, I cut them about an inch from the ground and let that inch stay in the ground so that it keeps regrowing. So at all times, I have a or a constant supply of scallions and green onions and stuff like that. So at all times, I have a consistent supply so I don't run out at all. So I have one raised bed, and scallions are all that is in that raised bed. There's nothing else in that raised bed. So they are there. I harvested them last year. I actually took them out of the ground, harvested what I want of them, and planted back that 1 inch that I left behind. And the reason I did that is so that I could control the amount of root that they were sending because I didn't want the bed to get overcrowded. And then I replanted them, so they're out there now. So it will be interesting to see how they survive the winter. I know that I have a neighbor 2 blocks down the road who grows bunching onions, and every year hers come back this big bundle of it. So I'm hoping that my scallions will come back, and I have a lot of green onions. I have a raised bed that is 10 by 2 feet, and that is the entire perimeter of that is green onions. So I'm gonna see if those come back as well. Let's see. Melanie says, that's great. You've got some progress. Yeah. Have you ever tried ginger? Yes. I tried growing ginger for the first time last year. Um, I've never grown ginger since I've been in this region. And I tried growing some last year. And you know, the funny thing about it, I had ginger in one container and I had curry ginger, turmeric. We call it curry ginger. Yeah, so I had turmeric in one container, I had ginger in one. I plant three curry ginger or turmeric in one container, and I had two in ginger in the other containers. And every time I go out into the garden, like literally every single day, the ginger would be on the surface of the on the surface of the containers. I'm like, what's happening? Why is the ginger always on the surface? I put it back down, it is on the surface again. It's not that it is growing. And then I noticed once I went out and there was no longer three but two in one container, and the other container only had one. And then I went back another time and I noticed that the turmeric, there was only one in the container. And then I realized that something was actually digging it out. So I end up without the turmeric, but for the ginger, I had two of the plants, and we had an early frost. I think that was the 8th of August, which is unusual. We don't usually get frost in August, but we had an early frost and it killed my ginger. So this year, a few months ago, I planted some. They took forever to start growing because I think maybe they don't have enough light, and where I had them, they weren't getting enough heat, and ginger requires heat. So I moved them about 2 weeks ago and put them close to one of my heat vents, and I noticed that finally one of the ginger is starting to push its bud out of the soil. So yeah. I also did a video last year at that point in time when I planted my ginger on how to grow ginger. Let's see. Question for everyone. Have you ever heard of the single seed challenge? No, I have never heard of it. Melanie says she's never heard of it either. Yeah, I've never heard of it. Sounds interesting. Excuse me. So, what is it about the single seed challenge? I don't. There are some challenges that I would like to participate in, but there are others that I don't. So, what is that challenge called? Star Wars? Yes, it sounds interesting, but I don't like the fact that it is a competition. So, because it is a competition and I don't take part in any form of competition, so I don't get involved with that. Um, and like those 40 question challenge that they're asking you about your personal life, um, I don't get involved with that either because that is just too much information. But yeah, it would be interesting to know what it is about. Let's see. I have not yet, but I bought some from the store, and turmeric too. Zone 6A here, so will take some time. Okay. Turmeric is really difficult to get in my region, extremely difficult. Occasionally you see it. Ginger is easy to get here, but the variety of ginger that I get here, I don't like because they're thick and they're full of liquid. None of those are bad, but the flavor is extremely lacking. What you have to use to get any flavor from them, it is just terrible. So occasionally we will get some ginger from Jamaica. So whenever I get that, then that is what I have attempting to grow now. Hopefully it will do well in our climate. Okay, and White says she's heard of it. Okay. LP says hundreds of seeds. That's fantastic. I'll have to go back and watch your scallion video. Great tip about cutting them so that you can keep harvesting. Okay, thanks. Yes, it is pretty good. Even the last video that I did, I think that was last week. No, maybe the week before last, on those scallion that I was growing hydroponically on my windowsill, and then I transferred it to the soil. I have been using from that every single day. I go there and I cut out what I need and use, and it just regrow, and I keep cutting and using. So it is pretty good. It's a nice method to use because then you don't have to keep running to the stores to get more. I just make sure that I keep on giving it enough nutrients so that it will grow fast enough for me to have enough to use. Let's see. And white LP says, I sowed single scotch bonnet pepper seeds and they have germinated. I also sowed single green peppers and I'm waiting. Okay. And she said she has tried ginger. Yes, I remember you did. I think you did a video on growing ginger, didn't you, a few weeks ago? Yeah. So yes, I've never really tried growing single seeds. Well, that's not true. In the past couple of weeks, I have been doing single seeds because I am not really growing these things that I'm planting single seeds. I'm not growing them to keep them to transplant them outdoors. But because of the how to grow video series that I'm doing, sometimes I plant single seeds so that I can have a plant to show while I am showing how to grow whatever the plant is. It is a couple of challenge. It's a couple challenge created by a YouTuber, Scott Head. I've heard of Scott Head. Pick a seed, any seed, but just one, and document the growth and life of the seed. Oh, nice. Interesting. Sounds like something I'd like to do. Hi, best yet. My first time chatting the live. Welcome, my dear. I'm glad that you were able to take part in it. So let's see. LP says, that's a bummer about your turmeric being dug up and your ginger dying. And you start months ago? I'm so behind. Um, the reason I started the ginger months ago is not because I wanted to start at that point in time, but that is the time when we were able to get the Jamaican ginger at the supermarket. Well, let's say supermarket. So I didn't want it to dry out. So I planted it right away so that I can have it growing because I know that if it is in the soil, even if it is not growing, or at least not obvious, not growing where it is obvious, then at least it will be there and it won't be drying out as it would if it is in the fridge. So that is why I actually started it then. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Let's see. Russell says, I have heard of the single seed challenge from Gardener Scott. Okay. Oh, I think I'm reading the wrong way. All right. So on white says, yeah, go single seeds. I'm going to be doing cube or butter squash, butter summer squash. It's a yellow squash, totally new to me. Okay. Yeah, and document the progress so I can see. I had to put mine up by the heat vent too to get it started. Yes, ginger does love a lot of heat, and I think that is why mine wasn't really growing. But I didn't mind at that point in time. But now, when the growing season is about to begin, I would like to be able to harvest some ginger. So definitely, I had to put it by the heat to ensure that it does grow. Okay, that's great. Okay. Um, Scott Head started the challenge last year, and I think it was pretty popular. I didn't know of it last year, but I'm excited to join. I don't think it's a competition, more so a challenge to ourselves. Oh, okay. In that case, I will definitely be challenging myself with that. I did a video on how to grow shop bought ginger. Okay, yes, I remember as you mentioned that I'm starting to remember the details of that video because although I was growing shop bought ginger, there was one particular point in that video of yours that stood out because it is very good to know. Okay, so LP says to Russell, yes, Gardener Scott. That's where I saw Scott had talk about single seeds. Will you, Russell, be joining the challenge? Okay. Mini. Lots of information. Great. Thanks for sharing. Okay, you're welcome, my dear. No, I won't be doing that. After I get my garden planted, first week in June, worms will be flying out of my ears. Yes, this is usually the time of year when people go crazy for worms. Right throughout the year, they want worms, but between spring and summer, people go crazy for worms. So and for casting, so you're gonna be pretty busy. So if anybody is going to be doing that challenge as the growing season starts, now would be a good time to get started because there's going to be so much to be done in the garden because I think pretty much everyone is growing more stuff or planning to grow more stuff than they previously did. So I think we're all going to be very busy this year. LP says you should record the flying. Yes, I would like to see that too. Uh, so yes, White Davy. I look forward to you possibly joining the Sea Challenge. Look for it on Scothead channel. Okay, Melanie says, we'll let the grandkids do the challenge. They will have some fun with that. Hmm, good idea. My daughter, she just loves to grow. She's pestering me, Mom, when am I gonna get seeds to grow? She eats an apple, she takes the seed out. I'm going to grow this seed. And everything she eats, she takes the seed out and she's going to grow. And I'm telling you, no, it won't grow like that. But I think she's pretty anxious to get started. So maybe it's a good idea. I could make her grow those single seeds as well. And it would give her something to do so she can bug me a little less. LP says, good tip about keeping ginger near the eat. Let's see. Are you done planning your garden? No, my dear. I'm not finished yet. I still have quite a few things to do. For the companion planting, I still have a few of the plants that I'm going to have to. I know what can be companion planted together. And most of what I plan to grow, I've already put the list of what I'm going to be planting with most of those plants, but I still have some of the plants that I haven't put what I'm going to be growing together yet. And what I find is that even though I've put some together, I keep going around and switching around because I don't want to end up with too much of one thing and too much of another thing or too little of something. So I keep switching them around to see how it can work best. And then I also have to figure out how many of each plant, apart from like the leafy lettuce and stuff like that. I don't care how many plants of those I have, it can be any amount. But for things that take a lot of space, then I need to know where I'm going to be putting them, and I need to know how much of them I'm going to be planting in a particular location. And then for things like peppers, different varieties of peppers cross pollinate, and I don't want them to cross pollinate. So because of that, even if I'm growing them in the same bed, I have to figure out what can I put in between these plants to ensure that they have sufficient space, that they don't cross pollinate. And I have to also think about the space that each plant will occupy. So say for example, I'm going growing pepper and marigold. How much space does the marigold take up? How much space does the pepper takes up? So that I can know how many plants I can put in each location or in each bed. So because of those little intricate details, I am not quite finished yet. I think I am finished planning out my four large raised beds. I'm finished planning those out. Half of my main garden, but for all my containers and my small raised beds, I'm not nearly finished planning those out yet. So I still have that to do. But because I've got so many things doing between the gardening and the worm farm and the rest of the house, so because of that, it's kind of hard to find the time to settle down and get it done. But I have to do so pretty quickly because by the end of March, I need to have practically all the things that I intend to start indoors growing. So we'll see how that goes. What about you? Are you done planning? Uh, LP says, Melanie, that sounds lovely. I love that your daughter is already a gardener. Good for her. Maybe she needs her own little garden bed. I'm not done planning either. Okay. Yes, she actually has her garden. Yeah, she has her own raised bed. I think it is 2 feet by 3. So last year she grew lettuce, tomato, what was that other thing? Strawberry in her and carrots. So every time she'd go out and harvest her strawberries, and she would harvest her carrots, and I let her share that raised bed with her little brother. So he plants his stuff too. At that point in time, he was only 2, but I would help him to dig the hole and give him his seeds or whatever if he's transplanting something. So yeah, so yep, they do their bit of gardening and they love it, especially when it comes to watering and harvesting. But when they're watering, of course, the plants are drowning. Yeah, but yeah, they enjoy it. So we'll see. I wish I had more space so that I could give them more. Because when you listen to her listing all the things that she's going to grow, she's going to be growing pumpkins, and she's going to grow carrots, and she's going to grow cabbage, and she's going to grow lettuce. And she has this she last year she made a list, and the list was so long. She's growing melons, and I'm like, darling, I'm sorry to tell you, but your raised bed cannot hold all those things. And she was so disappointed, but it's just like us. We want to grow more, but the space is just not there. So it's a nice lesson for her to learn from early. Let's see. And White says, I'm still planning my garden and it is tedious, but I'm enjoying it. It is tedious, but it is also fun, especially when you see it coming together, and especially when you anticipate doing the actual planting and the harvesting. Yeah, it is enjoyable. LP says, I hear you there, Han. it is intimidating too. I'm trying not to overthink too much and to allow myself to make mistakes. I can't be perfect. Oh well. Oh well. Yes, it's true. Gardening is fun, but we can also take the fun out of gardening. So we should only do so much that we can enjoy it. If it's going to become more like work than something that we enjoy, then we're not going to want to do it. So we have to be careful how much we do. So even if we have to do small amount in stages, then whatever works to make sure that we enjoy it. So, Amaya says, you did a video on them, the kids harvesting. Yes, I did a video on them harvesting their stuff last year. They were so happy, and especially my daughter I had to be on her like, girl, take your face out of the camera. She's just like she wants to be all all up in there, but kids have their place, and I don't think kids should be getting exposed so early. So yeah. But yeah, I did a video with them harvesting their stuff, and they were quite happy about it too. Let's see. I rearrange my living room so I can have windows to sow my seeds. I'm not laughing at you, dear. I'm laughing at myself because, as I mentioned in one of my previous lives, my husband doesn't like me growing things in the house because, as you know, these houses here in Saskatchewan is built from boards, and he is concerned about the moisture that the plants are gonna encourage in the house. Um, so I was using one of the spare rooms to do my gardening, and he knew that I was using that to do my gardening. He doesn't like it, but anyway, he doesn't say much. But then in my office here, he comes in and he looks on the windowsill and he sees some more plants on that windowsill, and he said, it's like, and then he goes over into the other spare room and he looks and he sees more stuff on that windowsill, and he's like, and I can tell he's just biting his tongue. But what to do? I mean, I can't start anything in the garage because I don't have grow lights, and the garage does not have windows to provide lights. So I have to grow somewhere. So he's just gonna have to be patient until it's time to transplant them outside. Okay, so she's ambitious. That's a good start. I'll have to find the kids' harvest video. Let's see. Eleni. Okay. Best to keep them safe, the kids. Yes. And I know my little girl, she loves to be seen. She loves to be seen. At one point in time, I went on my channel and saw a video that I did not put up. She took a video of herself and uploaded it on my channel. I had to quickly erase the video. So, yes, I have to be careful with her because she doesn't know danger. So she could be putting out things out there that is putting herself in danger. So I have to make sure that I keep her safe because she can't do it for herself. But yes. Okay, so we have been at it for a while and it was quite a lively discussion. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I get to relax my face muscles a bit. I was laughing about your husband and the plants. Yes, I can't let him see that I'm laughing, but when I saw him doing that, I had to go one side and hide and laugh. Yeah. But I guess that is life, eh? It's always about give and take. At the end of the day, he's gonna enjoy. he always enjoy the harvest anyway. So, right. So I think I'll be closing down shortly. So if there are any other comments or questions, we'll take those, and if not, then I'm going to be saying good night. And thank you guys. It was really fun hanging out with you today. It's good to see that the internet lasted and did not cut out this time as it did with the last two lives that we were doing. Hopefully, it will stay that way. Okay, so I think I'm gonna say good night now. So have a good night, guys. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. This was fun. I'll go back and watch what I missed. Okay, my dear. Thanks for all your support. Good night, everyone. Good night, and White. Stay safe until I see you again on Friday. So Friday, we're going to be continuing that discussion that we were doing about commercial worm farm, what you need to know about it. Okay, see you, Melanie. Bye, Russell. You're welcome, my dear.